do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indie Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indie Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Shout out Gritty. Apparently today's Fat Tuesday. It's the last big party before the 40 days of sacrifice. Didn't know that. We're learning new things here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show, which is great. If you watch on YouTube at Indies Sports Ticket on YouTube, then you can teach me more new things. That sounds great. Anthony Richardson, he's going to be the starter for the Indianapolis Colts this next season, and this is where I want to start the show today. Okay, when I mapped this out yesterday, I was kind of sad doing so. Then I saw this news that the Minnesota Vikings are not going to tag Sam Darnold. So now I've got a little bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, the Colts will actually pony up the dollars that they need to go and sign a quarterback that can really play. But I don't think that they're going to do that because it is in the best interest of Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen for Anthony Richardson to be the guy for them. It is in their best interest because it makes them look smart. And I think that a lot of these NFL, decision makers in terms of personnel, especially a guy like Chris Ballard, I find them to be rather stubborn. And when you look at the options that the Colts are rolling out, that stubbornness is going to win out. They are going to start Anthony Richardson this season. And it's not surprising. Names like Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, Jameis Winston, Daniel Jones, those have been the four names I've seen the most, especially the name Daniel Jones. And that's just the most frustrating thing in the world to me. And honestly, I feel like an idiot because I actually believed the Colts there for a second. Like, why did I do that? What about the Colts that made me want to believe them? Like, if they wind up bringing in one of those four quarterbacks or a different quarterback on a similar level, that's not real competition. If one of those four people, beat Anthony Richardson out to be the starting quarterback, then Anthony Richardson deserves to be out of the league as far as I'm concerned, because if he's competing against Daniel Jones or Justin Fields, the Colts will give him every possible advantage that they can. Okay? He's not going to get beat out by one of those four players, though, so I'm not too worried about it, because once again, the best thing for Shane Steichen, the best thing for Chris Ballard is for Anthony Richardson to be the starting quarterback, for the Colts to win 10 games, and then to continue on. Or not even that. Even if Anthony Richardson's just like a little bit better. They'd be like, hey, maybe one more year. He comes back and he's really, really good. I doubt it, but we'll see. Okay, so it doesn't feel like the Colts, if those are the names that they're actually looking at, the Daniel Joneses, Jameis Winstons, and Justin Fields of the world. If those are the guys that they're looking at, they are not looking for competition at the quarterback position. They're just looking for another capable backup who, if Anthony Richardson gets hurt and misses 4 weeks, then all four of those players could step in and win a few games for the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, that's what it feels like the Colts are doing. They're not looking for competition. They're looking for a capable backup. And all four of those guys would be, anyone on that Daniel Jones level would be a capable backup. Once again, we're still holding out hope over here. It was reported yesterday that the Minnesota Vikings are expected to not franchise tag Sam Darnold, which means like he's going to hit the open markets. The Colts will have the opportunity to make a bid for him. I really hope that they do. I think that would be the best thing for the Indianapolis Colts. Bring in a guy like Sam Darnold and just move on from Anthony Richardson. Okay, I think a lot of people, or especially fans, they all seem like they're done with him. Move on. Bring in a guy who appears to be capable. Let's figure out whether or not Chris Ballard at least hired the right head coach in Shane Steichen, because I find it hard to evaluate him when, his Starting quarterback is Anthony Richardson, a guy who only completed 48% of his passes last year. Okay? Like, if the Colts are going to bring in Daniel Jones or Justin Fields or whoever as competition, like, they might as well just bring back Joe Flacco. Not really. Anyone but Joe Flacco. Please. Anyone but Joe Flacco. Okay? If I have to hear another person tell me that Joe Flacco's great because he won a Super Bowl over a decade ago, I might go crazy. But this is where we're at. Once again, really, Chris Ballard lying to the media, Shane Steichen not answering questions. And that is still the thing that I am most intrigued by this season. Anthony Richardson, I'm 90% sure, is going to be the starting quarterback for the Colts this next season. Because if it's not Sam Darnold, it's going to be one of those guys that I mentioned, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, so on and so forth. Okay, so it's going to be him. This roster isn't going to be that much better because I just don't expect for Chris Ballard to, hit on 4 draft picks, and I don't expect him to bring in a ton of free agents and to flip this roster on its head. Like, I don't expect Chris Ballard to do that because through 9 years of history, we have seen him do that 0 times. So my biggest hope for this season in terms of seeing the Colts improve as a football team is for Shane Steichen to have gotten better as a head coach. That's the thing that could impact the Colts the most this season. Even if Anthony Richardson comes back and he's better, like, he's not going to come back and be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Like, it's just not going to happen. If he comes back and he's better, I expect him to complete like 58, maybe 60% of his passes. Maybe he runs a little bit more. Maybe instead of missing 5 games, he only misses 3. Okay, like, I don't expect Anthony Richardson to come back a fully new transformed quarterback, and I do expect for him to be the starter because, once again, that is the best thing for Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. So when it comes to the Colts and being better this next season, I think that whether or not the Colts make the playoffs or not, whether the season is considered successful or unsuccessful, it's going to come back to whether or not Shane Steichen actually improves as a head coach going into his 3rd season. That is such an important thing for me and such an important thing to watch in this 3rd year. Can Shane Steichen help keep the crap out of the locker room? Can he get Anthony Richardson to show up early like he did later in the season? Can he get Anthony Richardson to put in all of the extra work that we expect for good, successful quarterbacks to put in? Can he get Anthony Richardson to do that? And look, if he can do those 2 things, then the Colts can go 9. Then the Colts can go, 10-7. They'll be fine. They'll sneak into the playoffs as like a 7 seed. Okay, if that happens, and maybe Anthony Richardson comes back a little bit better, and if Laiatu Latu and Adonai Mitchell come back better players after a full off season, and Shane Steichen can keep the crap out of the locker room and keep and hold Anthony Richardson accountable, then the Colts team can go 10-7. Okay, that kind of feels like, as of right now, we haven't seen the draft. We haven't seen what they're going to do in free agency, if they do anything. But like, as of right now, it feels like this is a team that at best could go 10-7 if everything goes perfectly. Anthony Richardson comes back. Laiatu Latu comes back a better player. Adonai Mitchell comes back a better player. I don't think all that's going to happen, though. I don't know what the Colts' schedule is, but if they have a winning record this next year, really no matter what they do, I'll be surprised. Because this organization, from the owner and Jim Irsay, who's extremely absent, all the way down to the guys in the mailroom, they just aren't very good at their jobs. I have 0 faith in anyone in this organization. And like, why should I? All they've done for the last 5 years is lose games, miss the playoffs, and then circle back around and be like, guys, we're close. We're close, guys. And so, yeah, I have no faith whatsoever in this organization. And if they find any sort of success this next year, beyond winning a couple divisional games, I will be genuinely surprised by all of it. Next thing that I do want to talk about here, because, as badly as much as I think that the Colts are not going to be very good next year, and as much as I think that the Colts are going to just kind of sit on their hands in the offseason and bet on Anthony Richardson and do all of those things, I still have hope because I want them to be good. I would like to talk about a football team this next season that's good, that has some excitement around it, because, I know everyone kind of expects for Indiana football to be great this next year. I don't know if they're going to be or not. So, Colts, do me a favor. Darious Slay was released by the Eagles yesterday, and the Eagles just released their other corner, or another corner. They released James Bradbury, former All-Pro guy. Go get Darious Slay. Please, Colts, I'm begging you. Begging you. Okay, the Colts need a corner. They need a guy with some swagger. They need a guy with a legitimate presence. Darious Slay checks all of those boxes. Darious Slay would bring a new edge to this defense as well. And the Colts need that. They need someone to set the tone, not named Zaire Franklin. Okay? And yes, I know Darious Slay, he's a little bit older, but they need a leader on the back end of their defense. They are incredibly young on that side of the ball. They're probably going to be bringing in a new safety. Jalen Jones, it's only going to be his third year in the league. Samuel Womack. I don't think anyone is listening to him. But you bring in Darious Slay, Super Bowl champion Darious Slay, my bad. And that's a guy who can lead the back end of the defense. He can also, he's also good at football. Samuel Womack and Jalen Jones aren't the most reliable players in the world. Malik Neighbors, a rookie, was licking his chops last year when the Colts played against the Giants because he knew he was going to be open all the time, and he was. And the Colts gave up, 350 passing yards to Drew Lock, and they gave up 45 points. The Colts need more experience, more talent on the outside. Darious Slay checks both of those boxes. Once again, Super Bowl champion Darious Slay. Okay? Like that's who this guy is. Okay? He talks a ton of trash. He plays with a legitimate edge. And the Colts need these things. They need talent. They need a leader on the back end. They need, a guy who plays with an edge. They need a legitimate leader on that side of the ball. And Darious Slay can be all of those things. Shane Steichen talked about building a winning culture at the combine. He was asked, how do you do that? And he said, it'll build itself if you win. I don't know about that. That feels like a bit of a stretch for me. But if you want to build a winning culture, then you have to bring in players that have won before. And Darious Slay is a guy who's won quite a bit in Philadelphia. Okay, this is a guy who's not going to accept losing, and the Colts don't seem to have anyone like that on their roster. They talk about things like the process and getting better, which are important things. But what's more important than that? Winning. That is actually the most important thing at this level. And if you want to build a winning culture like Shane Steichen talked about, then you have to bring in a guy like Darious Slay, who has won before. He's won. He was one of the leaders of that Philadelphia Eagles defense this last season. Now, the reporting is that he will likely re-sign with the Eagles. Okay? The Eagles just cut him so that they could bring him back. And yeah, so they cut him to save some cap room, and then they can re-sign him. That's probably what they're going to wind up doing. But the Colts should overpay for him. Seriously. They should overpay. They need a real leader in their locker room, especially on the defensive side of the ball, especially on the back end of that defense. Okay? And I'm sure, Colts' new defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, would really like to have a legitimate cornerback on his roster. Okay? And this guy, Darious Slay, could solve multiple issues for the Colts in the locker room, having a legitimate leader, having a guy who's legitimately competitive, and more importantly, a guy that can actually play football at a high level, at a high enough level to win a Super Bowl as a starter. Okay? Would really like it if the Colts brought him in. They probably won't. He's probably going to go back to Philly. But once again, money talks, and I'm very rarely in favor of overpaying someone. But if I were the Colts, I would overpay for Darious Slay. Got a big show lined up for you today. Jared Dubin of Last Night in Basketball, he's going to join the show coming up at 10:20. Indiana, they're playing Oregon tonight. Don't worry, we will definitely dive into that game quite a bit. Purdue, they're hosting Rutgers tonight. They have an opportunity to win back-to-back games. So it's going to be good. Can't wait. Jared Dubin, he's set to join the show coming up here in about 4 minutes.
may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. It's always a must-listen when Jared Dubin, who covers the NFL for CBS Sports, also covers basketball over at Last Night in basketball.com. It's always a must-listen when he joins the show, as he does right now. Jared, what's going on, man? How are you?
Not too much, man. How are you?
Man, I'm doing pretty well. You know, just trying not to lose my mind over what Chris Ballard's probably not going to do this offseason. But aside from that, man, I'm doing pretty well. So you have this piece that you send out from time to time on your Substack, once again, Last Night in Basketball, where it's just these different things that you notice when you're watching games. And you sent one out, I believe it was yesterday, on Halliburton and him, you know, playing cornerback and just his ability to kind of read these passing lanes, which I believe he has like 15 steals in his last 4 games or something like that. Have you noticed Tyrese Halliburton? Do you think Tyrese Halliburton is a better defender this year than he was last year?
Probably, if only because I think that last year was like the worst defensive season of his career to date. He's always been someone who is not necessarily as good a defender as you want to be, but has still been able to make plays by jumping into passing lanes like I wrote about. He is really smart, and when he gets his eyes looking in the right direction, then he can make those kinds of plays. And he did it by breaking up the Jokic-Murray two-man game twice in the span of like 6 minutes in the fourth quarter, or the third and fourth quarter of that game they lost to the Nuggets last week.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Every time Jokic turns the ball over, I have to I make like this double take of like, did Jokic really just like not make the proper choice there? It's really funny, and that's like I think that's kind of the path for Halliburton, because he's never gonna be some lockdown defender. But you watch guys like Steph Curry, Jokic, guys who were maybe not as athletically inclined, but they're just in the right spot that they're able to be impactful on defense. And is that kind of the path for Halliburton to be a serviceable defender?
I think so. That and figuring out a way to more consistently weaponize the fact that his arms are, like almost 7 feet long. Because he was a good defender in college. Some of it in the NBA is that he's a little bit too slight to be able to deal with the kinds of, bigger wings that you might want to put him on, given that he's, 6'5" with really long arms. But you put him on bigger wings, they're just going to be too physical for him. And you also don't want him to take that kind of pounding physically, just because of how much responsibility he has offensively. But even if you're hiding him on, the weakest offensive threat, you can still make an impact by doing things like being in the right spot at the right time for the right reason. And that will lead you to make plays. Like, he does make plays in terms of getting steals. It's a matter of being more consistently locked in on the other stuff. And then I think on the ball, figuring out a way to use his length better than he does.
Joined by Jared Dubin of Last Night in Basketball.com. You can read all of his stuff there. He's a fantastic writer, so make sure you go and check out all of his stuff. So kind of staying with Halliburton, there are games where I watch him, and I think he looks like one of the 10 best players in the world. And it's the games where he's doing more than just hunting his 3-point shot on the offensive end, games where he's scoring it at all 3 levels, which he's really good at. What is Tyrese Halliburton's ceiling in terms of like he could be, the blank best player in the world?
I mean, there was a point last season where it looked like he might make first team All-NBA. Like that was sort of the peak of what we've seen from him. I don't think he's been the same player since suffering that injury against the Celtics, where his legs looked like they were going to split apart. Yeah. I don't think he's been the same guy since then. I don't know if there's an extended shutdown that he needs to be able to get back to the level that he was physically. Obviously, this last summer, he was playing with USA Basketball, so that was not really possible. Granted, not actually playing in the games, but, you still got to be exerting yourself physically in practices and getting ready and whatnot not like he was actually doing nothing out there. Maybe he needs a sort of extended break to be able to get back to that level. But even if he doesn't hit that, if you're a top 25 or so player in the league, like I think he's been somewhat consistently, at least when he's playing at his best, that's still really, really good.
It is. And, the interesting thing about him is he's come back from the All-Star break, and you mentioned him like needing a bit of a break. And like he played, like you said, for the Olympics last summer. I believe the summer before that, he was playing in FIBA and doing all that kind of stuff. So he's played just a lot of basketball over these last 3 years or so. And since coming back from the All-Star break, I mean, he's at like 69 assists and 6 turnovers. He's scoring the ball really well. Do you think that that's a result of just having, 5 days off?
I mean, it could be. I obviously don't know directly. Like I'd have to, have a look at the injury scans and whatnot, which I'm obviously never going to get, and I wouldn't know what they actually mean in the first place. Anyway, granted, I've had enough of my own injury scans that I might actually be able to read them at this point. But it's certainly possible. Like that's not to say that he wasn't capable of throwing up monster assist games before. It's not like he's a stranger to 15, 17 assist games like he's had a couple times in the last few games since the break.
What's the Pacers' ceiling for this season?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to get out of the first or second rounds for anybody. Like Cleveland and Boston are so significantly better than everybody else in the Eastern Conference, and then so like you're not going to beat them if you're in the first round coming out of the play-in, and if you're in the 4-5 game, then you're going to play Cleveland in the second round. If you're the 6th seed, you still have to play the Knicks in the first round. Even if you get by them, you got to go play Boston in the second round. It's just really hard for me to see any team other than Cleveland and Boston being in the conference finals because, even if you wanted to say the Knicks could get there, who have been the third best team in the conference, they got to go play the Celtics in the second round, and that's not happening for them. So it's just really tough for me to see someone going beyond that.
Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at Last Night in Basketball.com, also covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com. He is a Cowboys fan, so if you want to feel sorry for him, there you go. So you mentioned, so here's where I'm kind of holding out hope for the Pacers. Over the last 25 games or so, they've been top 10 in defensive rating, and they've had a top 5 offense in the NBA. Like, is that because like I'm with you in like the Celtics and Cavaliers are far better than everyone else, but like, is that good enough to potentially pull off an upset?
Yeah, I mean, if you maintain it throughout the rest of the season and the playoffs, but you can choose 25 game stretches of a lot of teams as sort of an arbitrary endpoint and say, look, this team is better than what their full season record shows. There was a stretch like that earlier in the season for the Knicks where they had a top 10 defense, but we've seen since then they've sort of fallen back off. Granted, I think that the Pacers' better defense typically coincides with them having Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith, who are really important to the way they want to defend just because of the ball pressure that they're able to put on opposing teams. But, I think we've seen, like, even in the playoffs last year where, there was a big, the Pacers defense is so much better conversation. I think a lot of that was Damian Lillard was playing hurt in the first round, and then the Knicks had basically nobody on the team healthy in the second round, and then all of a sudden Jalen Brunson was also injured. And, we saw the Pacers pressing up and down the court against both of those teams and throwing the offenses out of whack. Then all of a sudden they play the Celtics, and it's like they got blasted off the court. I'm not sure how much I necessarily believe in them being a top 10 defensive team.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think the thing about last season, it wasn't injuries, but like the first 50 games of the season, like before the All-Star break, they were like 30th in defense. And then after the All-Star break, they were like 18th. And so like, even like while there was improvement, like not enough, things feel a little bit different this year though. Like Mathurin, like he's playing, I think he's a much improved defender from where he was last year. Miles Turner, I think, has been better at protecting the rim. So while they may not be a top 10 defense, I do feel like they're better than they were last year. Do you see that?
Yeah, for sure. Like the last year's defense, like you said, for most of the season was a bottom 5 unit. And I think this group is pretty obviously better than that. Some of that I think is the size that they have out there with Siakam and with Neesmith and even with Halliburton, the size and the length, and then obviously Jamal Turner behind them. That helps a little bit, but it would also be pretty difficult to be as bad as the defense was for the significant portion of last season. I think the difference is that their offense hasn't been the best in the league like it was for a lot of last year. You can get away with having the 12th to 18th best defense when you have the best offense in the league. When your offense is 4th to 10th or whatever, you need to be better on defense than that.
Agreed. Totally agree. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightbasketball.com, also covers the NFL at cbssports.com. I want to switch gears to the Cavaliers because I was wrong on something. So they make that trade for DeAndre Hunter. People went crazy. And I was like, I don't know. I still don't feel like they're better than Boston. But he has been a big pickup for them so far. How has he made Cleveland better?
Well, he's making like 65% of his threes since he got there. So that's pretty much the most significant thing, because he's only shooting like 40% on his twos since he got there. So I would like to see what happens when the shooting stabilizes a little bit, because I don't think he's going to shoot 60% from three for the rest of the season. Yeah. If he does, then yeah, maybe they're better than Boston because you just can't leave literally anybody open at any time. I don't think that's all that likely that he's going to hit 60% of his threes through the rest of the year. If he does, then it'll be the first time that anybody's ever done it. So, let's I would say wait longer than 8 or 9 games before we declare, a trade the biggest success in the history of the deadline or not.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And then, they had the game against Boston the other day where Drew Holiday and Porzingis didn't play. Celtics go up by like 23 in the first quarter. Jason Tatum does the whole, get the F out of here thing, and then he gets clowned for it because they end up losing. But like 23 points in the NBA now, especially in the first quarter, it sounds like a lot of points, but it's really not with the way that these teams shoot the ball now, especially a team like Cleveland. My biggest concern for them is Darius Garland is going to close games, and just having watched Boston these last couple of seasons, like, they're going to get him switched onto Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or Porzingis, and they're going to get a good shot every time late because of that. What is your biggest concern for Cleveland?
I don't know if my concern is necessarily on Cleveland's side. It's that Boston just doesn't have weaknesses to pick at in the way that Cleveland at times does. Like you mentioned, Darius Garland. I think the big thing that swings a lot of the games for those teams is that the Celtics can use Jason Tatum to guard Jared Allen or guard Evan Mobley when they're the center, and stash Porzingis or Horford or whichever big man is on the court on a less threatening player. And the Cavs don't really have the ability to do the same thing. Like Jared Allen pretty much has to guard the opposing center against the Celtics, unless it's Drew Holiday out there. But even then, they'll just use Drew Holiday as the screener, and you're still putting him in the action and getting him switched onto Tatum or getting him switched onto Jaylen Brown. And that's just not as comfortable for Cleveland as it is when Boston tries to do the same thing. And Boston is just so good at keeping Porzingis out of the action or keeping Horford out of the action in a way that almost no other team can do. And then Porzingis is just such a ridiculous mismatch on the other end, because if you guard him with Jared Allen, it's just going to be threes all day. If you guard him with someone smaller, he has gotten so much better at posting up against mismatches. He's one of the most efficient post-up players in the league these days. And he's gotten better at passing out of the post when he gets doubled too. So it's less for me that the Cavs have a specific issue than that the Celtics don't really have any. And there are sort of pressure points that they can push that other teams can't.
I'm glad that you brought up Porzingis and just how much better he's been, when he posts up. Like he's not Joel Embiid level, but like when Kristaps Porzingis catches the ball at the elbow, I'm like, they're probably going to score here, whether it's him or like you said, like he's just become a much, much better passer. I think the other team kind of in this equation, because it feels like there's only 3 teams that are good enough to win the whole thing: Cleveland, Boston, and the Thunder. Even though like the Lakers, like they have Luka and LeBron, and I know that there's concern about their size, But I don't know about you, Jared. I would rather have Luka and LeBron than like an actual center. What do you make of the Lakers and kind of how they've looked since they brought in Luka?
I would also rather have Luka and LeBron than an actual center. That's just fine by me.
Yeah.
I think in the playoffs also they can go to something like, Luka, LeBron, Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and Dorian Finney-Smith and get away with it against most teams. There are some teams that are obviously going to be able to punish that, but other teams won't. And when you have like the ridiculous looks that they're able to get by having two super genius level offensive players on the court together at the same time, and the way that LeBron is playing since Luka got there at a level that, I don't want to say it's a level that we haven't seen him hit because we see him hit this level all the time. Yeah. It's just obviously a really encouraging level of play. I saw some stat the other day that's like since his 40th birthday, he's producing at the same level that he did when he was like 27, which is just completely insane, obviously. But yeah, and I mean, it's not just the two of them too. Like the looks that Austin Reeves now gets because the two of them are on the court together. I mean, it's crazy what he's able to do and the freedom that he has to play with because of those two guys. And I think the way that Hachimura was playing before he got hurt the other day was just reflective of the opportunities that guys are able to get when you have two of those guys. It's like two of the same player almost on the court at the same time for a lot of the game. And then you always have one of them to run the offense when the other is off the court. And I think the big thing about that is the offense that you want to run with LeBron and the offense that you want to run with Luka looks the same. We've seen the optimal theory of offense around both of them, and it's the same thing. You want to give them a rim roller, and you want to give them shooters, and you want to let them basically just dictate the flow of every single possession if you can. And that's a big issue for teams when the superstar is off the court and your entire offense is built around letting them dictate every possession. When that guy's not on the court, your offense completely falls apart. We've seen that with LeBron throughout his career. We've seen it with Steph Curry. We've seen it with Jokic. We see it a lot of times with Giannis. Like, typically, you're not able to sustain your offense because the guy who is your entire offense is on the bench, and you don't just have an entirely separate offensive system. The Lakers don't have that issue now. They can run the same offense when one of those guys is off the court because the other guy is out there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've noticed. And like when they came together, I was like, oh, it's like if like Denver had two of Jokic, like that's kind of what it's like. Because like you said, like they just dictate everything, and when one's off the floor, you're always going to have the other one on, and so their offense is always going to get a good look. What feels like every time down the floor. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com, also covers basketball over at Last Night in Basketball.com. So the other team in the West, Oklahoma City. I guess they're not the other team. They're the team out there. I heard Brian Windhorst say last week that teams aren't worried about the Thunder. Why do you think that is?
Because they're young.
It's that simple?
Nobody thinks a team that young can really be as good as it is. I think that's to me what it is. I think people sort of refuse to accept that they can be as good as their resume because they're so young. And then I guess because they lost in the second round last year to the team that went to the finals, like because PJ Washington had like an out of body experience and shot like 60% from three. And at the same time, the shooters that the Mavs were leaving open, like Lou Dort and Cason Wallace and whoever else, shot, 30% from three, as opposed to the 40% that they shot during the regular season. So now that means that because they're really good this year and they lost last year, they're actually not as good as we think. The resume they're putting together this season is like 10, 12 wins better than what it was last year. They have the second best net rating of all time right now, behind only the 96 Bulls. Like, it's insane what they're doing. And I think people just don't want to believe in it because it's such a young team.
Yeah, and when I watched them, you were talking about Boston earlier and how they don't really have a weakness. I don't really see one with Oklahoma City either. I guess if you wanted to say, Jalen Williams is their second best, offensive initiator, then maybe. Like, is there a weakness with the Thunder?
Yeah, I think the weakness is somewhat similar to Cleveland, where there's always going to be one guy out there that you maybe are not that interested in guarding behind the three-point arc. Unless you have Isaiah Joe as the fifth guy out there, but then that does give you a guy that you can maybe at times hunt a little bit on defense. Like he tries and he's got decent size height-wise, but he's very slight in the same way that Halliburton is slight or Darius Garland is slight or some of the other good offensive players are slight, but obviously Joe is a little bit of a different offensive player. He's just a guy that's never going to miss from three, and you need to guard him at all times. Yeah. But he's not the guy that's initiating the offense, so it's a little bit of a different effect that he has out there. But to me, there's going to be one guy out there, whether it's Caruso or Dort or I'm trying to think who else they might throw out there as that fifth guy. Aaron Wiggins even. Like Aaron Wiggins hits the shots. Dort hits the shots during the regular season. But teams just aren't going to care if they hit the shot in the postseason. They will say, you know what, if we get beat because Lou Dort and Aaron Wiggins shoot a combined 45% from three, then that's how we got beat. At least Shea didn't beat us. At least J-Dub didn't beat us. At least Chet didn't beat us. That's sort of the avenue that teams take in the playoffs.
I love Aaron Wiggins. He's been one of my league pass Jim wouldn't be the right word, but he's one of those role players that I'm like, oh, Aaron Wiggins is on the floor. I want to just watch how he impacts the game in a positive manner. Or who are some other league pass role players that you just kind of found this year that you really like watching?
I'm glad you asked that because I was about to mention that Aaron Wiggins is probably going to be the lead of my last year. I did these, I call them the all Dubin teams, which is like the role players on teams that are not going to be probably up for any of the season-long awards that are my favorite guys in the league to watch this season. Aaron Wiggins is going to be up there. Santi Aldama from Memphis is going to be up there. Both Champagnes, wherever they're on the court, from San Antonio and Washington. Russell Westbrook, for most of this season, has been playing like a guy who should be up there. Chumani Kamara from Portland. Moussa Diabate, the only reason to watch the Hornets at this point. Quentin Grimes in both of his stops so far this year. Asar Thompson and Amen Thompson, both of them. If neither one of them are in the mix for season-long awards, they're both going to be on my team. In Cleveland, Dean Wade and Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome could be in the mix for most improved and for sixth man, so he may not be on my actual teams at the end of the season, but he's up there. Goga Batadze in Orlando has been a really good role player for them. I got a lot of different guys that I think would fall on that list.
Okay, I'm going to have to read that one then. That sounds awesome. Joined by Jared Dubin of LastNightInBasketball.com, also covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com. Two more questions for you really quickly before I let you go. What are your thoughts on the whole face of the league conversation? Anthony Edwards' comment saying that he doesn't want to be the face of the league, and then LeBron saying, why would you want to be the face? Because everyone's really mean now. What are kind of your thoughts on that whole conversation?
I don't know that there necessarily needs to be one face of the league. I think one of the things that gets said often is it has to be an American player, and I think that's a little ridiculous too. So it's not something that I think about all that often, to be honest with you. There are so many good players. The idea that you need to have one guy who is the face of the league. I think that's how you end up in periods like the immediate post-Michael Jordan era where nobody was interested in anything because you're just banking the entire league on one guy. So I wouldn't do that. I would build up all of the really good players in the league. As far as the coverage of the league and the ridiculousness that players get subjected to, this is something that I've been on for a very long time. I think the issue is that most players and an alarming amount of fans consider the media to be the guys that do the debate shows on TV. And that's not really the media that covers basketball on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of roping everybody else in with the guys who are sort of pontificating on TV and admittedly don't watch games or obviously don't watch games based on what they say, that is sort of an issue.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Your point on not necessarily having one face, I think is really good. Especially since like we've had phases during the NBA where we've had multiple faces, like, Wilt and Russell were the faces back in the 60s. And then you have the Bird and Magic Johnson era. And then I think right now, like, I feel like there's two between Curry and LeBron. Obviously, I think you'd want more than two, but I think the thing that I find so interesting about it is like you have to have this like interesting combination of like being cool and also being really good. I think Colin Cowherd said it really well. I guess this was last week. How like Jason Tatum just isn't cool enough to be the face. So who do you think are the guys that kind of have that cool factor?
Anthony Edwards obviously is one of those guys. Victor Wembanyama, very clearly going to be one of those guys. I don't know all that much about Cooper Flagg yet because I don't do my deep dives on prospects until shortly before the draft, but apparently he's viewed as one of those guys. And like, there are just so many really good, really young players in the league. Like, you can find plenty of guys that are cool. And also, like, it's not like, Larry Bird was the most interesting personality in the history of the world. Like, Jason Tatum can be one of the faces of the league, even if he's not like flamboyant. The guy is a consensus top 5 player in the league. He's an all-star starter every year. He's first team All-NBA every year. Finishes in the top 6 of MVP voting pretty much every year. Like, he's a consensus top 5, top 6 player. He is one of the faces of the league, whether people want to admit it or not.
I think the thing with Larry Bird, like you're right, like he wasn't flamboyant, like people used to show up to watch him mow his grass, which I find really funny. But like he was still like stylistically, like the passing was like flashy. Probably isn't the right word, but like when I watched, going back to what Cowherd said, like you can see like the Magic Johnson smile, you can see the LeBron James tomahawk and those types of things. You can see, the Anthony Edwards posters with Jason Tatum. It's like I can see him hitting like a sidestep 3 to his right.
Well, it's very much like the Celtics, whereas Tatum's big thing is he doesn't have any real weaknesses.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that he's bad at. And that's how, like, if there's nothing that you're bad at, you're a really, really good player.
Yeah. You're exactly right. Joined by Jared Dubin of lastnightinbasketball.com. Last thing for you, Pacers play the Rockets tonight. And I think we're similar. Like the Rockets have been probably my favorite League Pass team to watch this year. Can you give us like a 30-second elevator pitch on why Pacers fans should go watch the Pacers play the Rockets tonight because of who the Rockets are?
The Rockets defend as hard as any team in the NBA. They have ridiculous athletes pretty much everywhere on the court except at center. But then Alperen Sengun is one of the smarter offensive players in the league, at least. And the way Ime Udoka has him playing defense makes the athletic limitations less obvious. But really the elevator pitch for watching the Rockets, just like keep your eyes on Ahmed Thompson the entire time he's on the court, and you will have so much fun.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Jared, thanks for your time, man. You were great as always.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
See you. That is Jared Dubin. You can check his stuff out at lastnightinbasketball.com. You can also read his stuff on CBSSports.com underneath their NFL section. Very good writer. Does a great job covering both leagues. And we come back here in about 90 seconds or so. I don't know if we have time for me to get into all my Indiana stuff, but we're going to try. My thoughts on IU Oregon when we come back here in about 90 seconds.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on Twitter, _ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. You can also listen via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Breaking news, people. The Jets have given Alan Lazard permission to seek a trade, which is, not surprising. It's like saying, hey, person in my life that I don't like, you're free to leave whenever you want. Seriously, like that's what that is. The Jets don't want him. They got rid of Rodgers. I'm assuming that they're going to push out everyone that Rodgers brought in with, his being there. So Devontae Adams, they're talking about trading him, and if they don't trade him, then they'll probably cut him, and all those different types of things. So anyway, Indiana playing Oregon tonight, and this is going to be a really fun game to watch. Okay, Indiana, a 6.5-point underdog the last time that I checked. Maybe that line has moved. Maybe it has not. I don't know. I do think that we're in store for a really good game. I do think that Vegas has undervalued Indiana here as of late because they've gotten better as the season has gone on. I know, what a concept. And because of that, I would bet Indiana. They're also just playing so much better right now. Like that's also just the very simple reality of it. Like the way that they've played as of late, playing through the post, being just more engaged on the defensive end, especially with Trey Galloway and Miles Rice and Anthony Leal, all three of those guys just being a little more, aggressive at the point of attack has led to them being a better team. And, it's made them more fun to watch, just this slightly more aggressive style of play. So I would bet them tonight to cover that 6.5-point spread. Purdue, they're playing tonight as well, 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, Mackey Arena. They're 11.5-point favorites now. I would still bet them to win and cover that game without a doubt in my mind. Okay. I think that they're going to roll tonight. This is an opportunity for them to win another game, 1-4 in their last 5. Part of why they won their last games because they shot 50% from 3 against UCLA. Don't think that they'll do that again, but it's Rutgers. They're talented. Anytime you're playing a team as talented as Rutgers is, you have to be worried about Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper Jr. going crazy, but Purdue should roll in that game. More breaking news. Things just only get worse for Maverick fans, apparently. Kyrie Irving out for the rest of the year with a knee injury. Gosh dang it. This is just brutal. I mean, he tore his ACL. Of course he did. Okay. Kyrie Irving out for the rest of the year. That Luka Doncic trade for the Mavericks just gets better and better. For those who don't know, I am a Mavericks fan, and this is it's so fitting given how their entire season has really gone this year. Another injury for this team that really couldn't afford to have anymore. They've been incredibly banged up. They've been playing without a center for what feels like a month now. Just another brutal, devastating injury to that team. And, geez. All right. When we come back, coming up top of the hour, I'm going to get a little more in depth on Indiana playing Oregon tonight. I do like them to cover that 6.5-point spread. Probably going to sprinkle a little bit on that money line there as well. Should be a really fun game. It's a very important game, right? Game starts at 9 o'clock, which sucks, but that's the simple reality of it. When we come back here in about 5 minutes, Indiana playing Oregon, and I'm going to give you the rundown on Oregon basketball and Indiana and why they're potentially going to win tonight.
do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Man, that first hour flew by. Big thanks to Jared Dubin for joining the show and talking a little bit of hoops with me. Indiana playing basketball tonight, going on the road all the way up to Oregon. That game doesn't start until 9 o'clock, which is just brutal. Oh, geez, 9 o'clock. And, as I was thinking about, Indiana playing Oregon tonight and kind of who Oregon is as a basketball team, it's just like, here's the best way that I can kind of describe them. So last night, drove all the way up to Lebanon. I live in Greenwood, by the way. Drove all the way up to Lebanon to play basketball last night with my buddies. One of my really good friends, Matt, he's got a friend who is a basketball coach, and he was like, hey, Matt, can you get some guys together and kind of run scout team? We've got sectionals coming up. So he hits me up. He's like, hey, man, do you want to play? And I'm like, yeah, sounds good. So go up, show up. I see all of my buddies, dap them up like I do. And, it's like, hey, what's up, bro? How are you? And you probably do something similar when you got to work today. You say, hey, what's up, person? How are you? And then after you ask them that question, they say, I'm good. And then they say, how are you? And then you say, I'm good. It's a pretty normal interaction that you and I have every single day. And that interaction reminds me of Oregon basketball. Like the response you get when you ask someone how they're doing is always good. Like Oregon is good. They're never great though. Like when you ask someone, hey man, how are you doing? They never say great. Maybe every now and then, but they usually do not say great. Oregon, not great at anything. They're just good at everything. Okay, like they are middle of the road in the Big Ten in everything. They're 11th in points. They're 9th in points allowed. They're 10th in point differential. They're in the middle of the pack in field goal percentage and field goal percentage allowed. They're 10th in turnovers. They're 12th in turnovers forced. When you look at their players, like they don't have like a standout. They don't have any like insane stud. They don't have that. Okay? Like they have multiple good players. They have a lot of good players, actually. Right? They've got 4 players averaging double figures. None of them, though, are averaging over 14 points a game. They don't have a single great player. They got multiple good players, but they don't have anyone that's great. Like when you play against Purdue, like you have to deal with Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Rin. Like you circle them because you know that those are 2 great players, 2 of the best players in the Big Ten. When you play against Wisconsin, like you're worried about Tanji. No matter what happens, you are concerned about him. When you play Rutgers, you're worried about Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper Jr. Okay, because those are great players that are going to be top 10 picks in the upcoming NBA draft. With Oregon, I don't know. Like, are you really that concerned about Nate Brittle or Jackson Shellstad? Come on now. Like, they're both good, but there's no great. Like, I don't think Mike Woodson is losing sleep over those specific players. Now, Oregon's tough. They're a good team. They're well coached. They have a good amount of depth. Like they're probably going to play 9 guys tonight. They might play 10. Okay? But they've got 9 guys that are going to play. And the drop-off really isn't that dramatic because they have a lot of good players, no great players. Okay? Indiana is more than good enough to win this game. Okay, now Oregon has one thing that worries me, and that is Nate Brittle defensively is the leading shot blocker in the Big Ten. Like when I was talking about the whole, most of the time when you ask someone how they're doing, they say good. Like that's Oregon. But occasionally someone will say that they're great, or maybe you'll get I'm doing better than I deserve, or something like that. That's Nate Brittle on the defensive end. He's the leading shot blocker in the Big Ten. Like he's going to give Malik Reneau and Omar Ballo some issues. He's a legitimate 7'1". Okay, he's going to deter some of the interior offense that Indiana has been so reliant upon in these past couple weeks during this winning streak. So that means that Indiana has to find a way to either score around Brittle, which Malik Reneau and Omar Ballo are both more than good enough to do, or they're going to have to hit perimeter shots like they have here as of late. Okay, shooting 67% from three against Penn State, and then shooting 40% from three against Washington. Like they need to keep shooting the basketball like that, which means Luke Goody, Trey Galloway, Miles Rice, those three guys have to continue to hit jumpers. And if they do, then Indiana's going to win this game. Like that is the trump card for Indiana. Like when they hit threes, like they don't lose. That's what it seems like, at least, minus that game against Northwestern. But that's just because Northwestern shot lights out, just like Indiana did in that game. Okay, so if Indiana shoots the ball well, I really like their chances to win tonight. The way they've been playing as of late, it feels like they're going to win. Like it does. Like it feels like they've really turned a corner. Trey Galloway has become just a really impactful player, running the offense really well. Miles Rice being able to come in usually off the bench now, but he's been really productive defensively, like being able to pick up full court, getting to the rim more, making more threes. They're playing really well, and it's hard not to pick them when they're playing this well. Okay, that's just the really simple reality of it. Purdue, they're playing tonight against Rutgers. Purdue can lose this game because Rutgers is just uber talented, and anytime you're playing against a team that has two guys that are going to be top 10 picks in the NBA draft, like that is something to worry about. Now, I know that Purdue ran Rutgers out of the building in, New Jersey earlier this year. Okay, they beat them 68-50 2 months ago, right? This is when Purdue was really rolling and Rutgers was not, and they still aren't. They're 14-15, okay? Once again, Purdue won that game by 18. Purdue's a heavy favorite in this game, favored by 11.5, and they should be. Okay, like they should undoubtedly be a double-digit favorite in this game. But let's also remember, Purdue's lost four of their last 5, and the formula to beat them, not that crazy. Don't turn the ball over, get the ball inside, slow down Braden Smith. Can Rutgers do that? Probably not, because they couldn't do it last time. Last time when they played Purdue, they turned the basketball over 16 times, only had 20 points in the paint. So I'm not betting on Rutgers. That's not happening. Refuse to do it. Okay, I'll be shocked if Rutgers finds a way to win this game. With that being said, Ace Bailey's kind of a stud. Dylan Harper Jr., also a stud. Once again, two guys that are probably going to be top 10 picks in the NBA draft. Ace Bailey could potentially go number 1. I'd be very surprised if he did, but he could. Seriously, he could. And so the Rutgers has these two guys that are capable of beating anyone. And when you have two players that good, you do that sometimes. Like they beat UCLA earlier this year because Ace Bailey scored 20 and Dylan Harper Jr. had 18, and they shot incredibly efficiently from the floor. They beat Illinois 2 weeks ago because Dylan Harper Jr. scored 28 and Ace Bailey had 18. Okay, these are two freshmen who have gotten better throughout the course of the season. Like they're better now than they were 2 months ago when Purdue embarrassed them on their home floor. Okay, so and we've seen Rutgers win a couple of games because those two guys get going at a pretty impressive clip. Purdue's not a great defensive team. Okay, now they held them in check last time. That's why they won. Dylan Harper only scored 6 points. Ace Bailey had 17, but it took him 15 shots to get there. Okay, he was 5 of 15 from the field. So while Purdue's not, like I said, they're not really a great defensive team. Like they don't have Lance Jones from last year, who you can put on the opposing team's best player and feel pretty comfortable about it. They don't have any big freaks to guard Ace Bailey, the 6'9" sniper who can kind of put the ball on the floor, but not really. But with that being said, basketball, team game, team defense is a thing. So I expect for Purdue to keep those players in check, and I expect for Purdue to win. I expect for Braden Smith and Trey Coppin-Wren to be the two best players on the floor like they usually are. Now, while I think that Dylan Harper Jr. and Ace Bailey have gotten better over the last 2 months, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it tonight. Like Dylan Harper Jr. has 7 straight games with double figures. Ace Bailey, since that Purdue loss, only has 3 games where he scored 10 points or less, and every other game has been like 18 or more. It's kind of insane what those two guys have done. And if they both get going, then that could spell a little bit of trouble for Purdue. But that being said, and while, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey have both gotten better over the course of these last 2 months, so has Trey Kaufman-Renn. Okay? Like he's gotten better, over the course of these last 2 months. All right? Like this blew my mind last night. Trey Kaufman-Renn is the 3rd leading scorer in the Big Ten this season. Kind of crazy. It's like, yeah, he scores a whole bunch of points and he's a really good player and all of those different kinds of things, but like third best offensive player in the Big Ten in terms of putting the ball in the bucket. Geez, in the last month and a half, he scored 19 or more in every game but 2. He's been so dominant, and I expect the same thing from him tonight against Rutgers. Purdue should roll, but if they lose, it'll be because of those 2 freshman studs. It'll be because Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper Jr. do a really good job of scoring the basketball, and sometimes it's tough to match talent. No way around it. So those are my picks for tonight. Indiana covers that 6.5-point spread, and Purdue covers that 11.5-point spread. We'll have to wait and kind of see what they look like tonight. Can't wait. Purdue, they're playing Rutgers at 7 o'clock on Peacock. Indiana playing all the way out in Oregon. That game is not going to start until 9 o'clock. So can't wait to see that. When the Rutgers and Purdue game gets out of hand, you can just change that channel. You can watch the Pacers play the Rockets tonight. Okay, if you can go, then I think that you should, because the Rockets are so much fun to watch. They just are. Jared Dubin, 30 minutes ago, I thought he did a really good job of just briefly explaining why you should go watch them play. The Rockets, in a league that, has questions about effort sometimes, you never question their effort because Ime Udoka is their head coach. And if you don't play hard for Ime Udoka, he says, hey, you're going to come sit by me for this game. And it's great. So they're tough. They play defense at a very high level. In fact, I'm very interested to see how Tyrese Halliburton kind of deals with it, because I'm going to assume that the Rockets are going to put Dylan Brooks on him, given that he's their best player. Maybe they put him on Pascal Siakam, but I think that they're going to let Amen Thompson deal with him. So very interested to see how Tyrese Halliburton kind of deals with the physicality of the defense that the Rockets play with, because that's kind of their calling card. A tough, physical defense. That is who the Houston Rockets are. They are incredibly tough. Okay, like Tari Eason and Amen Thompson coming in and just wreaking havoc. And that's the other thing that's really fun to watch with Houston. Amen Thompson, this ascension that he's putting together just this year alone is incredible. So for those who don't know, Amen Thompson was the 3rd pick last year in the NBA draft. And people were like, I don't know if he's very good, but he's like an insane athlete. And when you watch him play, you're just like, yeah, that guy is an insane athlete. And so he's just been this super impactful defensive player. And over the past couple months, he's really kind of developed an offensive game. So, he's got this 12-foot jumper that he likes to make. He's not a good 3-point shooter, but he'll take them, and the jump shot doesn't look as bad as it did. Still doesn't look great, but it looks better than what it did. And because he's so athletic, he can get to the rim. And when he gets to the rim, he's probably going to score, because he's just this insane athlete who's just like, oh, there's 3 people in front of me. I'm just going to jump over all of them. And that's what he does. So if you get a chance tonight to go out and watch the Rockets play against the Pacers, you should totally do that. And if you have an opportunity to ignore every single move that the Colts make this offseason, you should also do that as well. But then again, they probably won't make any. So, there may not even be anything for you to ignore. Anthony Richardson, He's going to be the starting. He's going to be the starting quarterback for the Colts this next season. I'm going to tell you why when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice start to your week. It is Tuesday, which I, kind of forgot about. Because that happens sometimes. Sometimes I wake up and I'm just like, I don't really know what today is, but I know what I'm talking about on my radio show, and that's really all that matters. So Anthony Richardson, he's going to be the Colts starter this next season. Like, don't even worry about it. Am I holding out a little bit of hope that the Colts are going to sign Sam Darnold? Abso-freaking-lutely I am. But, my heart's just going to get ripped out when he signs Sam Darnold, when he signs with, the Rams or the Steelers or the Giants or someone like that. Because that's probably what's going to wind up happening. And then the Colts are going to be right back to where they are right now. And they're going to be like, hey, how about we bring in Daniel Jones to be that competition for Anthony Richardson? How about we bring in Justin Fields or Jameis Winston or someone like that? Seriously, because that's what's going to wind up happening. Those kind of seem like the guys that the Colts are looking at, and that's frustrating to me, not because of what the Colts are doing, but it's frustrating because I just feel like an idiot, Like, I actually thought that they were going to bring someone in to legitimately compete with Anthony Richardson. Why did I do that? Why did I actually believe this general manager who's done nothing but show up and just kind of lie ever since he got here? Okay? Like, I want to believe them so badly that I actually did, and I'm dumb for that. So if they wind up bringing in one of those, like, lower tier quarterbacks, Daniel Jones, Jameis Winston, Justin Fields, whoever, and, it's just, it's just going to be like, oh, look at Ballard trying to sell us on this being, like, an actual quarterback competition, because, like, it won't be. It won't be. And what'll be really concerning is if one of those guys, the Daniel Joneses of the world, if, like, someone like that showed up and beat out Anthony Richardson to be the starting quarterback, then Anthony Richardson should be out of the league and he should go play in Canada. Seriously. Okay? Like if he gets beat up on one of those guys, it's going to be so funny. So funny. But the truth is he's not going to get beat up by one of those, Daniel Jones level quarterbacks. The Colts aren't going to let that happen, because the best thing for Chris Ballard and the best thing for Shane Steichen is for Anthony Richardson to play and to play well. They just want to make sure that they have a capable backup in case he gets hurt again. And the guys that are about as good as Daniel Jones or Justin Fields or Jameis Winston, all four of those, or all three of those guys that I just mentioned, are very capable backups. Okay, the Colts would win. They would have a chance to win, the 3 or 4 games that Anthony Richardson is undoubtedly going to miss this year, because we all know that at some point during the season, Anthony Richardson is going to get hurt. That is what his history tells us. Okay, like, if those are actually the guys that the Colts are considering, the Daniel Joneses of the world, then this is no different from last year. The Colts aren't looking for a quarterback to bring in to compete with Anthony Richardson. They're looking for his backup. They're looking for a legitimate backup who if they need to play, then, he'll be fine. Okay? Simple as that. Like, seriously, like, if they're just looking for a legitimate backup, then they might as well bring in, like, Aiden O'Connell, Joe Flacco, like, bring him back. If that's all that they want. If you just want a capable backup, bring in a guy like Joe Flacco. Not really. Actually, please bring in anyone but Joe Flacco, because I can't listen to the Joe Flacco people again. I can't do it. I felt dumber every time I heard someone tell me that Joe Flacco should start over Anthony Richardson. Anyway, they're not going to bring him back, so I don't really have to worry about it. But this is where we're at, though. Same spot as last year. Looking for a backup quarterback as opposed to someone to really push Anthony Richardson. Chris Ballard lying to the media, lying to us once again. And Shane Steichen, when he gets asked questions by the media, just him not answering any of them. And for me, going into this season, he's kind of the guy that I'm going to be most intrigued by. The guy that's going to hold most of my attention. Shane Steichen. Not Anthony Richardson, not, any of these rookies, not Leatu Latu or A.D. Mitchell, Shane Steichen. Because given the history of Chris Ballard, this roster is not going to be that much better. It's not. Okay? And I think the real hope for the Colts to go from this team that went 8-9 to a team that could go, 10-7, maybe 11-6 if you get lucky, is Shane Steichen improving as a head coach. Like, that's the thing that could impact the Colts the most this next season. Like, even if Anthony Richardson gets better, and he comes back an improved quarterback, he's not going to come back as one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's not going to happen. In terms of making the roster better, I don't expect Chris Ballard to hit on like 4 draft picks. I don't expect him to bring in just like 4 or 5 new free agents that are going to show up and make the team better. I don't expect for Chris Ballard to flip this roster on its head. Whether or not the Colts improve and become a better football team for this next season is going to be based upon whether or not Shane Steichen improves as a head coach going into his 3rd season. Can he keep the crap out of the locker room? Can he get Anthony Richardson to show up early and put in the amount of work and then some that we expect for quarterbacks to put in? Can he hold him accountable? If he can do those 2 things, then the Colts can go 8-9 again, maybe 9-8. But they can go 10-7 if he does those 2 things, if he keeps the crap out of the locker room, if he keeps Zaire Franklin off the podcast, and if he gets Anthony Richardson to show up and be accountable. If he can do that, plus, maybe Leatu Latu comes back a little bit better. Maybe Anthony Richardson comes back and completes 60% of his passes this year. If Adonai Mitchell comes back a legitimate weapon. If all of those things happen, then the Colts could go like 10-7, maybe 11-6. But that's a lot to have happen in an organization that I just don't trust. Like, the Colts are going to go 7-10 this next year. That's probably what's going to happen. And then Jim Irsay is going to be like, gosh, dang it. Chris Ballard, my blue chip general managing prospect. Yeah, he didn't pan out. I guess I got to fire him after 9 years. And like, this is the way I feel. I haven't even seen the Colts schedule yet. They're playing a 2nd place schedule this year as opposed to the 3rd place schedule that they played last year. So the schedule should be a little bit tougher. If they put together a winning season this next year, if they go 9-8, I will be surprised. Because this organization, from Jim Irsay all the way down to the guys in the mailroom, are not good at their jobs. I have no faith in anyone in this organization. And like, why should I? All they've done for the last 9 years is miss the playoffs and be bad. And bringing in Daniel Jones or Justin Fields or Aiden O'Connell or whoever else doesn't fix that. They're still going to be a very bad football team if those are the guys that they bring in. Now, if they pony up and they bring in a Sam Darnold, I'm in. Okay, let's see how they look then. But I'm just not convinced that they're actually going to do that. Darious Slay was released by the Eagles. And while I don't think that the Colts are going to do anything, I am hopeful. And I'm hopeful that the Colts go out and bring in a guy like Darious Slay. Please, Chris Ballard, go get Darious Slay. The Colts need a corner. They need a guy with some swagger and a legitimate presence about him. Darious Slay checks those boxes. I think he'd bring a new edge to this team that the Colts desperately need, because the Colts need an edge set by someone not named Zaire Franklin. Okay, they need a legitimate leader on the back end of their defense, and Darious Slay can be that guy. I'm sorry, Juju Brents, Samuel Womack, and Jalen Jones. But like, I don't expect any of them to lead because they're young, and Samuel Womack's never really done anything. Okay? And when you look at the outside, like, Samuel Womack and Jalen Jones just aren't the most reliable players in the world. Like Malik Neighbors, a rookie, playing for the Giants, was just like licking his chops. Like, these dudes can't guard me. Drew Lock was like, I'm going to torch these two corners for 350 yards, and we're going to hang up, and we're going to hang 45 points on the Colts for our only home win of the season. Okay, the Colts clearly need an upgrade at corner. Okay, they need more experience and they need more talent on the outside. Darious Slay checks both of those boxes. He's a Super Bowl champion. Okay, he talks a ton of trash, and he plays with an edge. And the Colts need all of those things on their defense. And the thing that I like about him the most is he's not going to accept losing. Okay, and the Colts don't seem to have anyone in that building, definitely not on that roster, that hates losing. Okay, like the Colts have a roster in a building filled with people who talk about things like getting better and all that stuff. And that's important. Like, it's important to get better. The process of how you do that is important. But you know what's more important than that? Actually winning football games. That is actually the most important thing at this level, contrary to what the Colts want you to believe. Okay, Shane Steichen at the Combine, when he was taking questions, he was asked how to build a good culture. He said, if you win, it'll build itself. I don't know about that, but he believes it. That's cool. But if you want to build that winning culture, you should probably bring in some players that have won before. And Darious Slay, that is a guy who has won before. Okay, like that is a guy who can come in and lead the way. Like, he led the way for a young Eagles secondary this last season to a Super Bowl, in fact. Okay, so go get Darious Slay. He's an upgraded corner, and he can actually lead your defense. With that being said, he's not coming because Chris Ballard's not going to pay for him. It's not going to happen. The report is also that he's very likely to re-sign with the Eagles. The Eagles just cut him to, save a little bit of extra cap money, do all those things. But I don't have this opinion very often. But the Colts should undoubtedly overpay for Darious Slay. There's not a doubt in my mind that they should do this because, they need a real leader in that locker room, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Like, Zaire Franklin being your leader, not great. And I'm sure that the Colts' new defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, would like to have just a legitimate dude somewhere on his defense. Okay, DeForest Buckner's fine. Kenny Moore's okay. But Darious Slay is a guy who's been an actual dude in the NFL. And maybe he's not as good as he once was, but he's still a freaking good player. He's better than Samuel Womack. Okay, so Darious Slay, he is available. Colts, go out and bring him in. Indiana playing Oregon tonight. Big game for them. Purdue, they're playing against Rutgers. An important game for Purdue because, they're just trying to help out their seeding. They're not going to win the Big Ten at this point, but, this is a world where, you got to win it every game that you play. Purdue has an opportunity to continue to win games tonight when they play against Rutgers. My thoughts on why Indiana has a pretty good chance to beat Oregon tonight and why Purdue should roll against Rutgers. All those thoughts come your way here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice start to your week. Man, I played some basketball last night. I jammed my thumb. Just brutal. Like, if you ever jammed your thumb, then you know. Like, it still hurts. Seriously. Kind of crazy. Anyway, play a little bit of hoops last night. Jared Dubin, he joined the show earlier today. We talked a lot of NBA basketball. So started with the Pacers and Halliburton and just kind of his improvement from last year to this year, how the Pacers have gotten better, but it's still, they're still just, a kind of a step below where the Celtics and the Cavaliers are, like, like the rest of the NBA, really, because everyone seems to be kind of a step below where they are, just two teams that are just an absolute buzzsaw right now. So he was really good. Tony East, he's going to join me tomorrow. Pacers play against the Rockets tonight. He'll be there. He'll have, all the good stuff to say about the Pacers. He's joining me tomorrow at 11. And then Thursday, Joe Jackson from Boiler in the Stands, he's going to join, and we're going to talk a little bit of Big Ten basketball. Big week, loading, going to be great. So Indiana needs to win tonight. Okay, when we talk about making the John Buzzard, that's so true. Jamming your thumb does hurt the worst. Ring finger, runner up. Truer words have never been spoken. Okay, like, geez, dude, the thumb. Anyway, Indiana needs to win tonight. Okay, they play Oregon, and if they want to make the NCAA tournament, like, if they win this game, it feels like they're in. Okay, that's what it kind of feels like. And, as I mentioned, I went and I played basketball last night with my buddies, right? I see them, dap them up because I'm cool. And, like normal, it's like, hey, bro, what's up? How are you? Haven't seen you here in a few weeks. What's going on, right? You probably had a pretty similar, conversation when you got into work today. Like, you walk up to somebody, say, hey, man, how are you doing? And then, everyone gives the exact same response. I'm good. How are you? And then you give the exact same response right back. You say, I'm good. And then, like, that's kind of it. Like, that's a normal interaction that you and I have every day. It's an interaction that common people have every single day. And that interaction reminds me of Oregon basketball. It reminds me of this Oregon basketball team, because when you ask that question, when you say, how are you? The answer is good. It's never great. And that's Oregon. They're good at a lot of things, but they're not really great at anything. Okay? Like, Oregon is pretty middle of the road, middle of the Big Ten, and just about every single thing. Like, they're 11th in points scored in the Big Ten, 9th in points allowed, 10th in point differential, right? They're in the middle of the pack with their field goal numbers, right? They're in the middle of the pack in terms of the field goal percentage allowed. Okay, they're 10th in turnovers, 12th in turnovers forced. That's pretty middle of the road there. And then when you look at their players, same thing. They don't have anyone that's great. They got multiple good players. 4 guys averaging in double figures, but none of them are averaging more than 14 points a game. They're all like 2 of them. They're 2 leading scorers. One's at like 13.7, the other one's at 13.5. Like they don't have any standouts. Okay, like, it's just a lot of, yeah, he's good. Yeah, that guy's good. There's no great. Whereas, like, you play against some of these other teams in, the Big Ten, and there's great. Like Purdue. Braden Smith is a great college basketball player. Probably going to win the Bob Cousy Award. Probably going to win Big Ten Player of the Year. Trey Coppin-Wren, great player. One of the 10 best power forwards in all of college basketball. Okay? Like, great players on that Purdue team. Wisconsin. That Tanji kid, that dude's a stud. Like, watch out for him. Even when you play Rutgers, you're worried about Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper Jr., 2 guys that are going to be top 10 picks. With Oregon, it's like, yeah, like I guess we're concerned about Nate Brittle or Jackson Shellstad, however you say it. Seriously, they're both good. Definitely good enough to beat you because Oregon's a good team that's going to make the NCAA tournament no matter what happens to them tonight. But I also don't think that Mike Woodson's losing sleep over having to stop those guys. Okay, Oregon's tough. They're a good team. They've got some depth, right? They've got a good amount of depth. They've got 9 guys that are probably going to play tonight. The drop-off doesn't feel that dramatic. Like there's a lot of good, but there's no great. And that's why Indiana can win this game tonight. Seriously, like Indiana, I think they're going to have the best player on the floor. Like Malik Reneau, I think is going to be the best player in this game. The only thing worrisome about Oregon is this Nate Brittle kid. Defensively, he worries me. He's the leading shot blocker in the Big Ten. He's going to give Malik Reneau and Omar Ballo some issues. He's like a legitimate 7'1". He's going to deter some of that interior offense that Indiana has been relying upon, in these, past couple weeks when they've been winning games. They've won 4 in a row. All of those things, okay? So Indiana, how they deal with Nate Brittle is the thing that I'm actually most interested in seeing tonight, right? Because so much of their offense is relying upon getting into the lane and scoring. And when you have a guy like Nate Brittle hanging out in there, it makes it a little tougher. With that being said, Penn State, they had a really good shot blocker, and Indiana scored 83 points. It's like, well, why? Why did they score 83 points in that game against Penn State? The answer is because they shot 10 of 15 from 3. And they scored a whole bunch of points against Washington because they shot 40% from 3. They need to do that tonight. They need to hit perimeter jump shots just to kind of soften up, or not soften up, but to kind of make that, just to extend that Oregon defense a little bit. Like Luke Goody, he's been shooting the ball pretty well here as of late. That needs to continue. Trey Galloway, 4 of 12 against Washington. Can't have that tonight. He has to be better. Miles Rice, he has to continue to hit jumpers. Okay, and if they do, because Miles Rice, he's been shooting the ball really well here as of late. If they do that, if they continue to not turn the ball over and they continue to play defense at the level that they have been, then they'll win this game. They will win this game. Okay, no question about it. Okay, the way that they've been playing as of late, it feels like they're going to do these things. It feels like this defense that we've seen them play is going to be super impactful, and it seems like, they're going to keep hitting these outside jump shots. I have more confidence in Indiana right now than I have all season. Okay, so I'm going to take them to cover. They are 6.5-point underdogs. The last time I checked, I might even sprinkle a little bit out there on the money line, and we'll wait and see kind of how it goes. But I think that Indiana's a little undervalued right now out there in Vegas. They only had them as 2.5-point favorites against Washington, the worst team in the Big Ten. I mean, that's crazy. That's absurd. Okay, so I think they're a little undervalued right now. Still, that line's still sitting there at 6.5. If you want to go jump on it and bet Indiana to cover all of those points. Okay, Rutgers playing tonight at Purdue. So Purdue should win this game. They're 11.5-point favorites. But they could lose. Seriously, because Rutgers is talented. And now I know Purdue ran Rutgers out of the building earlier this season. Beat them 68-50 2 months ago. Purdue, heavy favorite, and they should be. But let's remember, Purdue haven't been playing great here as of late. Okay, part of why they beat UCLA is because they shot 50% from 3, 11 of 20, or 11 of 22. I don't think they're doing that tonight. And the formula to beating Purdue really isn't that crazy. It's don't turn the ball over, get the ball in the paint. Can Rutgers do that though? That is the question. They couldn't last time. Rutgers turned the basketball over 16 times. They only had 20 points in the paint. So I'm not betting Rutgers. I'm betting Purdue if I bet this game. And I'll honestly be shocked if Rutgers wins, but they can because they have two players that are awesome. Ace Bailey, that guy's going to be like a top 5 pick. Dylan Harper Jr., that guy's also going to be a top 10 pick. And when you have two players that are that good, you can beat anyone. Okay, they beat UCLA earlier this year because Ace Bailey scored 20 points and Dylan Harper Jr. scored 18 points. Like UCLA, that's a team that is firmly in the NCAA tournament. Like that is a good basketball team. Going back like 2 weeks, Rutgers beat Illinois because Dylan Harper Jr. scored 28 and Ace Bailey had 18. Okay, Rutgers has had a couple of games where those two guys got going, and they won because of that. And Purdue, in terms of like one-on-one defense, like not great. Like that's really where I think they miss Lance Jones the most, having a guard that you can be like, hey, go defend their best guard, and like you feel good about it. Like Purdue doesn't have that this year. They don't have a wing that really matches up well with Ace Bailey. Okay, but to Purdue's credit, when they went on the road to Rutgers and they played these teams, they did a really good job of keeping these two freshmen in check, right? Dylan Harper only scored 6 points. Ace Bailey had 17 points. But even though Ace Bailey had 17, he was 5 of 15 from the field. So whatever they did defensively, because I'm not smart enough to figure it out, I expect for Purdue to keep those two players in check and for them to win. That's what I expect. Just like how I expect for Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn to be the two best players on the floor. That's what I expect. Okay? And while I think that, and so with that being said, just because you expect something doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Okay? So while I expect for Purdue to kind of keep those two guys in check for Rutgers, it may not happen. Like Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey may be the two best players on the floor tonight. And if that happens, then they will beat Purdue. And it is possible because these two guys over the last 2 months have gotten better, right? That's what happens when you consistently play. Like you get better at things. Dylan Harper Jr., he's got 7 straight games with double figures, lit up UCLA. He lit up Illinois. Ace Bailey, since that Purdue loss, so over like a 2-month stretch, he's got 3 games where he scored 10 points or less. And every other game is him scoring like 20 or more. Okay, like that dude can really score the basketball. Dylan Harper Jr. is a good player. Okay, so like if those two guys showed up and were the best basketball players in West Lafayette tonight, like I wouldn't be surprised. With that being said, though, like they aren't the only guys that have gotten better since that game. Like Trey Kaufman-Renn has improved a ton over the course of the season, and since that Rutgers game, he's been awesome. Like, did you know that Trey Kaufman-Renn is the 3rd leading scorer in the Big Ten this season? In the last month and a half, he scored 19 points or more in every game that he's played in, except for 2. Okay, he's been so dominant. And I expect the same thing from him here tonight. Like, I expect for him to get the ball on the block, to figure out how to get to his right hand, and for him to score a whole bunch of points. Okay, that is what I am expecting from Trey Kaufman-Renn tonight. I think, once again, Purdue's going to win. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But when you're playing a team like Rutgers that has two guys that are as talented as, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper Jr. are, like, it's going to be tough. Like those games can be tough. Okay, once again, I would be very surprised, but we'll see. The, breaking news. Kyrie Irving tore his ACL. He's out for the rest of the year. Mavericks fans, it's brutal. It's brutal. So he's out for the rest of the year. They are now officially tanking for Cooper Flagg. Things just get worse for the Mavs. Anyway. So he's out for the rest of the year. Vikings are probably not So the deadline today to franchise tag a player, it's today. It's at 4:00. And it is believed, it was reported yesterday, that the Vikings are not going to franchise tag Sam Darnold before that happens, which means we've got some hope. Maybe, just maybe, the Indianapolis Colts will wise up and they'll they'll go out and they will spend the money that they need to bring in a legitimate starting quarterback to actually push Anthony Richardson. Look, I would give Anthony Richardson one more season, but if the Colts didn't want to, I would totally understand that. Totally understand them not wanting to do that, just given the lack of production that we've seen from him in these first 2 years, his inability to stay healthy and do those really important quarterback things, the lack of maturity that we've seen from him is also a very alarming thing. So if the Colts wanted to go out and bring in Sam Darnold, I'd be all for it. I would get it. Would a part of me be sad because quarterback, defense attorney wouldn't be a thing anymore? Undoubtedly, because that was always a really fun segment. Yeah, but we'll see what they wind up doing. Sam Darnold, if he does become available, please, Indianapolis Colts, go get him. Outbid everyone for him. Bring him in here, and let's win some football games. Let's be interesting, okay? Like let's do that for once, please. I'm begging you. Also, Darious Slay, wouldn't mind him as well. So free agency, it's about to really get rolling here starting tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun. So make sure you're tuned in right here to my show, The Real Jonathan Smith Show, from 10 to noon. We'll talk IU's hopefully win over Oregon. We'll probably touch on Purdue beating Rutgers. Tony East, he's joining me tomorrow at 11. We're going to talk a little bit of Pacers basketball. They play tonight at 7 o'clock at home at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. They're playing the Rockets. Make sure you go check that out. Also, make sure you check out the Dan Dockett Show, which is coming your way here in about 5 minutes, noon to 3. Should be a lot of fun. Armando coming up at 12:30 and Seth Greenberg at 1:30. Should be a great show from Dan Dockett. That show comes your way here in about 4.5 minutes.